brief overview. I want you guys to ask me questions. I mean, even if it's about my wardrobe choice today, I really thought it was going pretty good, and then I walked in the bathroom a minute ago and realized that maybe high-waisted pants were not made for bodies like mine. But in case any of y'all also have any fashion questions, you can point those out as we go.
It is really cute.
Well, I got a few odd looks because today was apparently Farmer Day in our office, and after about the 20th one walked in, I was like, "What the hell are you wearing?" I'm like, "Okay, I'm going back to my sweatpants and sweatshirt tomorrow." So, just starting out. So, kind of the like number one biggest product we probably sell is multi-peril crop insurance. So that is your acts of God coverage that you're able to purchase on crops. Specifically, in this area, obviously we write it on corn, cotton, grain sorghum, seed milo, peanuts, wheat, sorghum silage. All of your major crops have a multi-peril component that you can purchase. Two big deadlines per year when looking at these. September 30th is your deadline to purchase and or make changes on wheat policies or any of your fall small grains policies. There are policies now for triticale and barley, rye, things like that. But wheat is our predominant fall crop that we have a September 30th sales closing on. And then March 15th is the big one for all the spring crops. So every single year, as a producer, you should be looking at your policy with your crop insurance agent. It's really a big deal to us. For years, people got in the cycle of just saying, we're just gonna do what we did last year. Unfortunately, nothing anymore is trending like it did the year before. Obviously this year on wheat, our price was off over $1. On cotton, we were off 25% from what it was the year before. Producers may have had losses the prior year. When those types of things happen, obviously your insurance coverage changes. And so a good agent should be sitting down with a producer, and a good producer should be sitting down with their agent annually to go over the types of coverage, because everybody's different. I may have a farmer that is up to their eyeballs in debt. We're going to be looking at a much larger risk protection package for that producer than maybe someone who owns the land. It's paid for, they have a smaller percent share, they may have a certain amount of dollars they're shooting for. So it's not one size fits all. And it seems like every single year the government's going to roll out a brand new product for us to introduce. And so we at least need to go through the motions to look at whether or not that is going to be something viable for each person's operation. So kind of like it says, multi-peril, it's comprehensive protection, weather-related causes of loss. You can insure yield only, you can insure revenue, or you can insure both.
So next year will be my first year to farm. We've had a 20-year hiatus. So, how do I do this? I mean, I'm not sure how the crop.
So you find a crop insurance agent that's going to be a fit for you. The interesting thing about crop insurance is it's all subsidized by the government. So equal opportunity, all irregardless of the agent, the underwriting company, it is going to cost the exact same for the product you purchase. So you can buy an 85% policy with me and one with my competitor, and they're exactly the same. So it's very much a service based. Tell people this the hard way through 15 years. It needs to be a fit. You need to find a person that does business the way you do business. I'm very much a stickler for deadlines. I like deadlines. I can't stand doing things after deadlines. The government does give us excess time to process policies. A lot of agents use that for their sales period, that extra 15 or 20 days. I don't. And there's certain customers that through the years I've taken on that they could not fit that, it was bad for both of us. It was a constant struggle. And so you should get from an agent that you like doing business with them. And probably 30 to 60 days prior to that deadline, start the process. The biggest things you'll need to know are, how are you, what entity are you going to be using? Farm under, whether that's you and your individual names, the partnership with siblings, whatever it may be. And that's going to need to be the same type of entity that you're set up with at the farm service agency. And if you haven't gone down that, they are not as quick, since they are a full-blown government entity, they can't maneuver as quickly as we can. So, if you've got changes coming down the line, especially like that, if you're setting an entity or taking over a farm or ownership, start talking to FSA now. Just because they may have earlier deadlines and things than we do. But yeah, and then you'll just, the reason that aids to start early with that agent is there may be other things along the way, where they can capture a yield, like if someone else has been farming your farm and you're now gonna take on a share, that may even move that deadline a little further back. And so probably great to just find an agent you like is the number one thing, and start talking through all the different dynamics of that, because there may be some things they can do, early on to get you a better position on your yield that you're starting with. Because that's kind of where this flows into. So in multi-peril, you can purchase from 50 up to 85% of a yield. But what is that yield? That's kind of a big deal. So if you're an established farmer, that is going to be your yield that you've been producing on that specific farm. If you're brand new, we have to figure out what yield to use. That could be the county average, which the government publishes. So for example, county average on corn in Dallam County is, let's just say 210 bushels. So that is the actual yield you would start with if you're brand new. You would then look at insuring somewhere between 50 and 85% of that yield, to start your crop insurance. If you're an established farmer, like I said, we maintain minimum of 4 years yield, we maintain up to 10 years. So once you've got what we call a full database, when you've been functioning for 10 whole years, you start rolling years off. And those are like the way we break down in Texas by section. So for example, if you've got land on 3 separate sections, that's what we would call 3 separate units. So we are looking at insurance on each of those. You only get to pick one coverage level per county per crop, but we look at each of those separately and depending, especially on what you're planting that year. So, and let's see. So this is a quick snapshot. Like I said, I did this a long time ago when I built this, but sadly here in a second, you're gonna see the process. They're pretty relevant here 10 years later. So just talking about like an APH, what that is that's your actual production history. That's that average that we're using to insure against. So like, here's an example. So this was for an irrigated wheat farm. They've got 2 years, like when you see that T next to that 49, T in our world stands for county average. So this person did not have a full history. So we had to fill in to make our 4-year minimum with 2 years of T yield. So they got 2 years of county average at 49 bushels. Then they produced 42 bushels 1 year, 45 the other. So for this farmer, we're working off of a 46 bushel average. And in this example for wheat in that county, they could choose between 50 and 75% instead of 80. And that top level is dependent on county and crop. It can move. Typically you're going to see that, for a normal farmer, they are going to be insuring somewhere from the 60% level. We occasionally in corn will bump that 80 and 85% level, but honestly, for typical row crops, we're looking at 60, 65 and 70% coverage, in most cases. So the big deal there, everybody wants to talk about, well, I've got crop insurance, I'm covered if I have a loss. Well, if you're insuring at 70%, you're still eating the first 30%. So your deductible's big. I mean, just like your, whatever other insurance product you're using. If you have a complete failure, there's a big gap there because you're still taking on a huge deductible. And that is one of the struggles of doing business in Texas. Crop insurance is very expensive here. Our premiums, we are rated much higher than the Midwest, for example, just because our losses have been pretty significant, I think would be the word that someone would use. The weather here's been tough, for dryland farmers, obviously, it kind of forgot to rain about the last 10 years. Irrigated producers, we have struggled as well. We have had extreme hail the last 3 years. We've had water issues, and sadly, even in an irrigated scenario, when you're in the type of drought that we've been in, you cannot pump enough water in some cases. And then this year, August was so stinking hot that we struggled with pollination on corn. We pretty much crop we had out there. So just talking about production risk management here, that's just a scenario to show you. So if you decided you wanted to purchase a 60% policy on wheat, you had a 46 bushel APH at 60%, you're only covering 27.6 bushels. So in an irrigated scenario, it's not too good. I mean, that's a couple of passes of a sprinkler and maybe no hail. You get past that, your insurance does good. And we deal with this a lot, that, a lot of times our choices are 60, 65 and 70. you're choosing between 27, 29, and 32 bushels. Still not a very big difference. So when those types of things happen, we sometimes have to supplement with hail insurance on top of that. You know, we may use this to get us through the early parts of the growing season. And then come in closer to harvest and supplement with hail insurance if and when it's a good fit. So
And what about the like SEO and stats and supplemental coverage that they offer through the farm bills?
Okay.
Looking at.
yep, I'll hit those, or let me hit this one and then I'll talk about those really quick and what you can do with those products. So what I did here is I just put in a revenue component on top of this. So most producers right now use a product called revenue protection. So where the prior slide showed you what yields would be covered, we're gonna kick a price on top of this. So two things to remember on your price protection, you'll always have a base price and a harvest price. So base prices are set, obviously, at the beginning of the season. So for wheat, we set that price from August 15th through September 14th. It's a 30-day period that they measure the Kansas City July wheat board, so of the following year. Then in the month of June of that following year, they'll reset that purchase price. So there's times in crop insurance where you may not sustain a yield loss, but you can have a revenue loss. A combination of the two, either, I mean, there's all kinds of scenarios, but the revenue protection, where that's really come in, is that has allowed producers to do a little bit more risk management on that crop, where not only are they covering yield, but they're protecting themselves on part of that price that's available as well. Great example of where revenue protection was huge was not this past wheat crop, but the year before. We had initially set a wheat price in the $7 range and closed out at, I think it was 10.81. So when that happened, when we had that huge run in wheat price at harvest, all of our producers' insurance got reset to that higher price because they had elected, revenue protection. They chose that when we wrote their policy. So instead of being covered for $7, they were covered for 10. So all the producers that had losses, which was most of them, got paid at that $10 level instead of initially that $7. So it's kind of that security of, hey, great. Crops just took a $3 run, but I didn't produce one to sell. It gives you that ability to capture that price. So we write revenue protection 85% of the time, I would say. Where we don't is a lot of times on corn when we're just shooting to cover a higher yield. Or where a producer already has their dollars covered. Like if they are aggressive marketers and they say, you know what, I'm good on price, I just care about yield. Yield protection, because we're not having that price movement, is always gonna be cheaper. So we may be able to get on a higher coverage level, but like I said, cotton, wheat, all the rest of the crops, we're pretty much all at revenue protection there. Dee Dee mentioned Stacks and SEO. So what those are, they are two products that, just like Stacks sounds, it is stacked on top of your regular multi-peril coverage. Stacks is cotton only. It carries a better subsidy than SEO, but they both essentially do the same. So what those products are doing is if you purchased a 70% multi-peril product on cotton, you would be able to purchase Stacks, which would give you an additional 20%. So your trigger starts at 90% of a countywide loss. That's the only kicker though, is that while your multi-peril, your underlying policy is for your farm. So like if you get hailed out, you call me, I open a claim, we've got an adjuster, we're gonna pay like super fast. Stacks, it is gonna take over a year to find out if it works because it's countywide. And so it's literally all based off the performance of the county and the dollar value of that crop. And so to get that data, it ends up being like if you harvested cotton this fall, you will not know till next August has always been the date. I think this year they actually triggered all that in June. It was a lot earlier than we've ever seen. And there's some dynamics behind that, but they're stackable products. The problem is they're expensive. Stacks has worked extremely well on cotton, but especially in this area. But obviously it carries a pretty good cost. And sometimes what we run into is that we're having a hard enough time getting our producers to the basic level of coverage that they need on their underlying policy. And then you sit there and pitch them, 20 or 30 more dollars an acre, and they're like, oh my God, no, I can't do that. So it's to each his own. And it also depends on what we're doing with that lower level coverage.
Hey, Rachel, this is a dumb question, but what's the acronym for Stacks?
So Stacks is stacked income protection. Oh, that's wrong. Yeah.
Well, I just mean, is it like?
It's STAX.
AX. Okay. This is another dumb question. We've been using annual formation, so we kind of know all the mindset with MPCI.
Right.
And I have forgotten all the details. So if you've got, let's say, a 30 bushel wheat guarantee. And the pressure goes, and it's not worth it. You got nothing, and the pressure comes out, says that's 9 bushels. What do you get paid on?
You would get paid on the difference between your insurance guarantee and what they say is.
30 minus 9.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
So
thank you.
they do. And that's a good segue, into annual forage, which definitely has to be talked about here. But real quick, on your multi-peril, this is not even close to all the options that we can throw on a policy. They, like I said, they come up with new ones every single year, but these are the major things that we consider at those sales closing deadlines. So enterprise units is kind of the inner workings of a policy. Definitely a one-on-one conversation with an agent. Trend adjusted APH, yield adjustment, yield exclusion, all these things are used to manipulate your existing, so your APH, what we were talking about, your historical yield, we use these to manipulate that to a higher number. Obviously with higher coverage comes higher cost. So a lot of times in order to get all of those bottom things, with the exception of the cottonseed endorsement, we have to really look like enterprise units that are going to cheapen up that policy so we can add all the cool bells and whistles. And then the cottonseed endorsement, I don't even give producers an option. They get it no matter what. So I'll talk.
They just cover the cottonseed as well as the crop.
Yeah, so on a traditional peril policy, you're only covering lint.
Right.
But there's so much value a lot of years in that seed that this gives you, it's essentially a rider on your policy where if you sustain the yield loss on your lynch, you're also going to get paid a corresponding value. Like, 250, 270 a ton on your cottonseed. So, like I said, it's so cheap to add it that we don't even give it as an option. So.
Well, and my other question is like with the stats and the SEO and the supplemental, you have to give up your farm program, right?
So with Stacks, you cannot be enrolled in farm programs on cotton. So our PLC has to go, like you literally have to go to FSA and sign yourself out of farm programs on cotton. As of today, that is a huge conversation going on with the renegotiation of the farm bill, is to bring Stacks back where it's no longer that constant in and out, because it is a true management issue. Not only for FSA, but for your insurance agent, because we get a nice register on those mismatches after we've already paid the Stacks payment. So that's fun to get to go back and ask people for money after they've already been paid, because they didn't realize their landlord signed a farm into PLC or something like that. SEO, you can actually purchase it if you're in PLC, but not ARC. So have y'all gone over PLC and ARC and all that mess with farm programs? It's your basic FSA program.
Yeah, Mark talked about that a little bit a few weeks ago. For Title I, you're basically government.
Yeah. And we're gonna renegotiate a farm bill surely sometime in the next 12 months, maybe. So some of that may change. As far as annual forage, I think it's on another slide, but I'll go ahead and talk about that. So annual forage it's basically become a competitor for multi-peril, I would say, on our fall crops. It allowed producers to use a rainfall product as opposed to the traditional multi-peril. So prior to this year, a producer would sign up in July, which that is still the date. If you want to consider annual forage, July 15th is the deadline. It's a one-time annual deadline, and that's for the entire, 12 growing seasons now. But annual forage allowed a producer to use rainfall coverage over a 6-month period. So if they had a fall planted crop, then they were insuring it's 3 2-month intervals. So every 2-month interval stood on its own. So a best example was last year, had to report acres by October 15th. Coverage was September, October, November, December, January, February. The prior 2 years, it has been gangbusters. It has worked hands down, pretty fantastic. And the most interesting part of it was, as agents, we were 45 days in to that first interval before we even were reporting acres. And most agents are given 15 to 20 days to turn in their paperwork. So if you want to guess what was happening, people were only buying it if they knew their premium was going to get paid, which, you can't fault anyone for that. I played the same game. Now that has all been changed. RMA rewrote the program this last year because of adverse selection. kind of wanted to tell them, like, we told you this from the get-go, that this isn't real smart, that we already know where the rainfall is when we have to report acres. So now the way that that program has changed is that whatever, we've gone to 12 growing seasons, which as an agent is, I swear someone was sitting in Kansas City and said, I hate crop insurance agents, watch this. And they gave us 12 acreage reports per year to do on one policy. But now for every month that you plant, so right this minute, we are contacting producers that planted wheat in October, finding out by November 5th if they want to use annual forage. So for them, if they planted in October, now coverage starts in November. So we no longer have that hindsight, I guess, to go back and see. It's changed the use a little bit, but honestly, we still have a pretty large adoption of that product because it has worked so well for acres that were always going to be grazed out or forage, that were never intended for grain. The other places like where you're at, I mean, APHs in the Western Panhandle are tough. I mean, especially if you're a dryland producer, your historical yield, you may be down to 10 bushels. So if you're insuring 60% of 10 bushels, you got 6 bushel insurance guarantee. Who cares? Like that, I mean, you can get your water sprinkler out and make that happen. So annual forage provided not only a similar mechanism for those producers, but a lot more dollars of potential coverage. But it's all rainfall based. And what we're seeing this year, the biggest struggle the producers are having is one, we're supposed to be in an El Nino year, right? It's supposed to be raining here. Central Texas is finally feeling that. I think this last weekend, we're finally seeing some rainfall breaking loose there. But the biggest deal is like right here in the Panhandle in most of these counties, if you insure the months of like January, February, or November, December, January, February, like we were talking about, which that's what these guys right here that planted in October are looking at. Normal rainfall is like anywhere from 75 hundredths to 9 cents an inch. So let's just say you're playing with an inch of rainfall, which it's not even that good. And you're insuring at 75% of normal. So now you're talking 75 hundredths or less is all you have to play with for a 2-month period. That's pretty hard to jump out there and spend somewhere between $35 and $45 an acre on for a lot of people. Some say, I don't care. I want forage. If it rains, I get forage. This is great. I love it. Some others are like, meh, stop. He's back over to multi-barrel. And then I have some that like, this is the first year we've ever been able to kind of go back to the way we used to do things. They loosened some of our requirements on annual forage where now a producer can say, I don't want coverage. Like last year, you either had to put it on multi-peril or put it on annual forage if you had both policies. Now I can go back to the old, hey, that's grazed out wheat. They don't want coverage and pay nothing. And so we do finally have that option back.
Forage value does, like RMA assign a value to that?
They do, yeah. So county-based value is like $220 an acre. And by the time we put all the productivity factor and all that, I mean, some of our coverages are over $300 an acre.
Like wheat.
For wheat. Now, here's what I tell people. That's a bogus number. That is literally 0 rainfall for 6 straight months, which every single one of us feels like we experienced that the last 3, 10, whatever years. But that is truly not a drop of rain to get to that dollar value. So realistically, producers have seen kind of a net from $80 to $150 an acre the last couple of years, which I think would be bad years. I mean, we've been hella dry. Prior to that, you see, I mean, like I looked at one yesterday, or Friday. In the last 10 years, it has paid all the premium plus a net return 7 out of 10 years. The 3 that it didn't, it covered most of the premium. 2 of those, there was only 1 year, which was 2015, that they had to pay all the premium on some of these. So
The average rainfall in the other grid system still?
it's the same grid system as PRF on the grass policy. So the grids they're roughly 12 by 17 mile grids. They're about 12 miles wide, 17 miles long.
Is there a rain gauge on every, how do they get?
No, it's NOAA data, and this is for the grass too. So this answers both sets of questions. It's NOAA data. We think school net sites, mesonet sites, those types of things, because the data has gotten so much better the last 10 years. Especially when you get into the really sparse areas. So yeah, western Desmond County into eastern New Mexico, no man's land, where 10 years ago, it was tough. Like we had some years in there that there was some data that everybody was scratching their head, and it's pretty stinking close. Granted.
Can I ask you one? That's a question I've always wanted to ask, and everybody's always too busy in their sales. When you go in for dryland week, how do you sign it up? Is grain or grace? The safe one?
I tell everyone, just do grain grays. Your insurance agent can get you in or out of whatever they need to do, and that's the way, yeah, that's the safe one, is to do grain grays, because if you did grays only. Then you cannot put that on multi-barrel, you could put it on annual forage. If you did grain only, you can't put that on annual forage, you could put it on multi-barrel, so just hedge your bets and do grain grays and.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No,
And triticale, those types of crops, you have to pick a forage type option there, but yeah, on beef, just do grain grays.
And the annual forage is for annual crops, right?
It is.
CRM is the perennial.
Correct, yeah, so anything annually planted versus on the perennial side on PRF, you're talking your native grasses, improved grasses. Alfalfa, things like that we can pick out, and there is a haying component that kind of got forgotten through the years, everybody was so focused on the grazing and the range side. But there is a hay option, and we've seen a lot more interest in that. It obviously carries a much higher dollar value for people insuring. But so much of this ground around here is old CRP ground that they really do pull in and hay every third year or whatever. And so that's something to consider when looking at your PRF policy, if you have one on grass, which that deadline is coming up December 1st. I love PRF. So it's probably like a personal outlet to me, but like I grew up on a ranch, and so I've been in the crop side of things so long. I still very much love my ranching roots, and PRF and then some of the livestock products gives me a chance to kind of talk to a totally different customer base. I mean, there's a ton of crossover. Most of my crop customers have PRF as well. But it is designed for your grazing lands, or your hay ground. And just like we were talking about on the rainfall indexes, all things the same, except on PRF, you're looking more to calendar year. So January through December. You can choose as few as two-month intervals or as many as 6, which would get all 12 months covered. And that is most definitely an art, not a science. I will tell you, I do different things all over the panhandle. Like what I do in the Western Panhandle is nowhere close to the months I use in the Eastern Panhandle. I wrote one this morning for a policy in Hartley County. Great data, huge return, like 383% return over the last 10 years. And that is net premium return. Fantastic return. Cannot do all 12 months. Like you just flat can't make it work. So we've got coverage stacked 25% in 4 2-month intervals to make that policy work like we want it to. And it's like I tell people, that takes on more risk. Like we can be super conservative, cover all 12 months equally, and that's that. But your return is always going to be less. And the biggest thing that, to tell you guys, the biggest thing there is always know what somebody is selling you, because here's the crazy thing about PRF, where multi-peril is multi-peril. I can't make it look any jazzier if I quoted your multi-peril than anybody else. I can come in behind somebody else on PRF and make their agent look like an idiot. Because hindsight's great. So I can I have data back to 1948, and I can go sit there and manipulate data and make what your agent was doing look terrible, which is not fair to anybody. But that happens a lot in PRF. There's lots of salesmen out there that only sell PRF because they only want to work one time per year. They don't want to do all these other great products where we talk to our farmers like 800 times a month. But I do. But truly on the PRF side, I like a 75% policy. It works for this area really well. There's other pockets in Texas. We can't make 75 work. We have to bump up to 85. I hate 90, but somebody coming in behind can always take a 90% policy behind me and be like, well, look, your agent costs you money. That is right. A 90% is going to pay more dollars over time, but your effective rate is much lower. So your dollars are not going as far. And the one kicker that they forget to tell you is that you go write a 90% policy and have it not pay 2 years in a row, and you are going to have some mad ranchers trying to rip your head off because they just choked down $4 an acre. And, you stick that on 50,000 acres and that hurts pretty bad. So always look at, if someone's trying to sell you something, look at what you actually have in coverage and make sure you're comparing apples to apples, because that's what I probably see day in and day out where people really get suckered in. On PRF is there's some huge companies selling this out there. And they make the most beautiful presentations, and they hire meteorologists to tell you all the things that are going to happen. And, I fell into that trap one year where it was going to be an El Nino year. we are going to restructure all our coverage because it is going to rain. Guess what, y'all? It didn't rain. Like, once again, like we just, sometimes there's a time and a place to stick to what you know. And I feel like in that situation with PRF for sure, you need somebody that's going to be honest with you. And that's what the man that I wrote the policy for this morning, that's what I told him. Like, this is what I write on my own ranch. Like, this is it. This is how I do it. Here is more coverage if you want it. And he's like, think I'm good, you know? And I'm like, obviously I can make you more dollars if I sell you more insurance, but I want to see you 20 years from now and I still have that relationship and sell it to you one time. You'd be pissed and be like, I hate that person. They were terrible. So I do hear, when you get into like West Texas, for example, our dollar value goes down. So our county-based value here is $20 an acre. So when we piddle around, we end up with kind of $24 coverage, I think at 75. When you go to like, let's say you're out at, Fort Davis, Monaghan, somewhere down in there, they drop down to $8 an acre. So at that point, the 75 is still the most efficient, but sometimes we push the 85 just for dollars coverage, just like we do in New Mexico. Same strategy that, the government through the years has changed that value a lot. Like, we've been steady for 4 or 5 years, but y'all, the first probably 6, 7 years I sold this, I literally had to requote every policy every single year. I mean, nightmare sitting there because our dollar values changed so much that you could not, a guy might've been spending $1.50 an acre the year before, and you had to drop him so far down in coverage to get to that. And then the next year it was just whiplashing. And so it's been really good that they've held that number consistent, but overall, I like a 75, 150 best. But I do write the 85, 150. I hate 90. Like I said, at that point, so here, I'll tell y'all why. At 75, you're maximizing your government subsidy in your premium. When you go to 80 or 85, you lose 5% subsidy. So at that point, you're gonna see a pinch. Your money just doesn't go as far. When you go to 90, you just drop 5% more off government subsidy. So 90, in my mind, I just say, let the government pay 10% more. Play with that productivity factor where when it does pay, it's going to be greater. And here's the other concept behind that. Honestly, what is the difference between 75 and 85% of 9/10 of an inch of rain? I mean, it's minuscule. So East Texas, totally different ballgame. So I have to get way more creative there. Oklahoma is kind of hard in places. So Kansas is easy. Apparently it never rains in Kansas. So it's been pretty fun to ride it there.
So ranchers, a lot of our ranchers are more than hard-headed about kind of stuff to farmers.
Yeah.
Are you noticing they're adopting it better every year?
Yeah, they are harder. They're harder because they are so not used to us. Like, honestly, I can tell you, Lisa's husband, I call, he answers, we talk 15 times a week. Like, in multi-peril, you need each other. Like, they need us, we need them. We talk all the time through the stages of the claims, the stages of the crops. Do I need an adjuster? Do I not? What do I plant? All that. The ranchers, I'm like, do you want PRF again? And they're all like, oh, why the hell not? Literally, that's our conversation. Like, that's the difference in what I get relationship wise. And that makes it a harder relationship because it's all computerized. They don't need an adjuster. I mail a check every time one comes in with a letter. There's just not that really close, I guess, relationship with the PRF side, which I do hate that part of it. Like, I want to sit down and call everybody in the middle of the year, but when I do, they're like, oh my God, did I forget to pay my bill? What's on you? So, on the livestock products, have any of you guys used LRP? And Dee Dee, cut me off if I'm going too long.
Hey,
Good out.
hey,
Here. Have I used LRP or looked at that, the livestock risk protection? You have? Have y'all? Okay. So, livestock risk protection came out, gosh, I want to say probably 7 or 8 years ago, but the subsidy in it was tiny. So it was absolutely ridiculous. No one wrote it. No one used it. It was a 13% subsidy, which did not entice anyone to go use this product as opposed to using their traditional hedging options, whether that was, puts, calls, straight hedges, forward contracting, all those things. So there just wasn't enough attraction. I want to say it was either 3 or 4 years ago in October, they put all new subsidies in this product. And since then, we have seen the adoption rate go crazy. Plus, we've been at record high livestock prices kind of all summer. That drove a lot of interest in it. But all LRP is it is a subsidized put. So literally gonna lay a floor in your cattle. So if you called me, any day of the week, we can rock this every single day of the week, including Saturday. Any days that the markets are open, we rock from 3:30 in the afternoon until 8:25 the next morning. So it's gotta be while the livestock market is closed. But what it does is you're gonna literally go put a price floor in. So this morning I had a guy call that said, okay, I have 850-pound steers coming off wheat in March. What can you do for me? So I'll, and actually this one's a 750, I think, but that I put in here, but let me get there. Oh, she didn't put my slide in. Well, crap. Okay, well, I'll just tell y'all. So today I gotta think back what our prices were. So I think for a March feeder, I'm gonna say, I think it's 243, maybe. So for every single, like if you say I want a contract in March, I'm gonna get 10 options every single day. So just thinking back to your old futures and options trading, you can be an at the money put. So essentially I can go in and write at 99% of the current stated price, or you can back yourself off of that. And all that does is you have less coverage, but we're paying less dollars for it. So like today, somebody could lock up March feeders for $60 a head. That's high right now. We've had so much volatility the last 3 weeks in this cattle market, that volatility is a big driver in price. But the products that we can do, so you can do, livestock from 600 pounds and down. So like if you are a person that, has your own home raised cattle, you're going to sell them in, you calve in March, you're going to sell in October, and they typically weigh 600 pounds. We can write that weight class. We can write from 600 to 1,000, which is more of your true feeder market. We can write unborn livestock, which is actually right now, I feel like that's where kind of the sweet spot is. So right now, everybody's about to start their spring calving in the winter months. So when we start getting into January through March, a lot of people around here start calving. We can go in now and lock up those cattle for next fall. So like today or yesterday, it was Friday's quote that I looked at. It only went out through middle of August. So we'll probably sit tight another week or two. And as there's more trade volume in those further months, we'll finally probably start kicking out like a September and October tract. But for people to be able to go out and walk in their calf crop, the only restriction there is it only goes 599 pounds. So sometimes we can't get the weight that people are, like we calve in January, for example. So our calves are typically going to weigh 7 by October, but we could cover them up to that 599 pound mark. There's also a fat cattle side of it. So if you're feeding cattle in the feed yard, we can use the same product. It goes from 1,000 pounds to 1,600. And so what we do there is we can go, same exact concept every single day. We can price those livestock. And here's the difference with what we do versus what your commodity broker would do. Ours is insurance. So there's no margin call. And the beauty of it is there's no money up front. So like every other government product, the premium is carried until the end. Well, at 10% interest right now that people are starting to see on operating notes, that's huge. That one, you're not going to have that operating cost on your money, and you can put your money to whatever other use that you want and pay that premium on the backside if there is one. If you trigger a loss, obviously the premium comes out of that. The downside is obviously, like my husband, for example, loves to play with his hedges. It drives me absolutely crazy. That's why we don't talk about marketing in our house, because we will be divorced if we continue. And I even finally got to the point, I don't have to talk to the banker anymore either, because I was the one that had to send the margin calls every day. And that just led to major anxiety in my life. And so that's his problem now. But he likes to manipulate his hedges all year long. Like he may roll them. He may shift around what he's going to do. That's great. That fits him. He should have bought LRP. We priced it this summer when I tried to sell it to him repeatedly, and I would have been at the end of this. And I told him, like, you're my most highly subsidized customer. Like, work with me here. You get your price minus my commission. So it's just become a really, really good option to look at. The subsidy in it ranges from 35 to 45%. And so it can be very, very attractive to do that if you're looking at protecting your price on cattle. And like I said, it gives us every weight range, every type of cattle. It is literally as simple as it sounds. So it's probably the easiest product we write. It takes me less than a minute to quote it and write a policy. So it's just really, it's been really good. I wish I would have written one for every single person about a month ago. So before the current downward spiral, which the crazy thing is we're still at fantastic cattle prices. That's what's so hard is when something takes a nosedive, you know, everybody's so down in the dumps right now thinking this is terrible. And I'm like, hey, you're still locking in $2,000 a head on these things. Like we're really not in a bad place. And truly the conversation that I have every single day, I'm like, okay, what do y'all think the market's going to do? And they're like, well, I think it's going to go up right up until we go to war. I'm like, oh, well, fair enough. You know, y'all have always heard that there's always the black swan, the economic term, but I mean, I think that's here to stay. So do y'all have any questions on LRP?
The value for the unborn.
So what they do, they take the feeder cattle price, which is based off of a 750-pound steer, and it's 110% of that price. So like, I think today on those unborn calves, it was pricing out around 270. Which that equates back to like a 243, 44 feeder. So, but that's all it is, the 110%. And you actually get to lump steers and heifers together. So that's the cool part is you don't have to take a rollback on heifers. Cause so like if you waited until they were born, then to buy the contract, you would have to segregate steers and heifers. And steers are gonna be, have a higher price. Heifers are always gonna be 10% back. So like normally when you're marketing your cattle, it's so many cents back of the steers. In this product, it's just a straight 10%, but it's 10% in the beginning and it's 10% in the end, so it works. But no, all of it is based off the CME feeder cattle index, which is slightly different than the board, where the index is actually a rolling average versus the, you know, expiration date on the CME board. But those two, I mean, we've been within, you know, cents of each other. It's been like when the CME closes and when our contract closes, we're within a couple of cents of each other. So on the fat cattle side, it is based off of I think it's the 10-state area they use the kill data to come up with those prices. And they just put some new stuff into it this last year where they're using higher quality cattle, they're using more choice cattle to base those prices off of. So you're getting the benefit of the higher quality cattle that we're producing for your process.
So it's not on live cat, it's done on.
It's not on the board, it's off the index, which once again, they're essentially supposed to be the same, but you will see some slight variation there. And there is no basis. That's the one interesting thing, is that this product is all computerized, much like your rainfall insurance. So it doesn't really matter. I mean, like, when I say this, take this with a grain of salt, but when we lock in a contract, you're gonna tell me what you expect them to weigh on a certain day. So you're gonna say 750 pounds in lunch. If they weigh 725, and you trigger a loss, you're still getting paid at 750. They are not going to adjust your weight back unless we slide so far below that they suspect there was something crazy going on there. It also doesn't matter what you sold your cattle. And that's a very, very hard concept for people to get through their heads, because everybody said, well, I took my calves to the sale barn and they brought such and such. It really doesn't matter. It's all based off that index cost. So. Livestock gross margin, I'll just tell you, it's also available on feed yard cattle. I don't like it. It is so overly complicated that feed yards that have in-house managers are using it. I don't know very many normal people that are using it, but all it is you're crushing the margin between fat cattle and feeder cattle and adding in a soybean meal and corn component to it. So it gets really, really complicated. It has a lot higher deductibles. And it was truly geared for dairy, but it's used in the feed yards as well. Talked about that.
Is there any product that comes with dead losses?
So there's fixing to be. There is a brand new product that is rolling out. I'm glad you said that because I totally forgot. Called the Weaned Calf Program. This is something AgriLogic developed just this year. It's going to have a sales closing deadline of January 31st. None of us have been trained on it yet, but I read the manual. And essentially it is going to be coverage for, cow-calf operators that are spring calvers. It does not have a fall calving component yet, but it's just spring calvers. To go in and insure it's weird. They based it off of a crop insurance policy. So it's got a yield protection, a revenue protection option. It's got all these weird things. So you can cover, they want us to get the last 4 years records from producers to establish like an APH for them. But there's also going to be county average. So essentially we're going to have to take weaned calf like weights prices, all those things off the last 4 years. But that product itself is also going to cover weather-related losses, death loss due to disease, and things like that. Outside of that, your only option to cover death is full mortality insurance, and it's too cost prohibitive. You know, people use it on show livestock, bulls, stuff like that, but not for your typical cow calf herd. Yeah. But the wean calf deal, it's going to be very interesting to see how it plays out. You know, right now, January 31st is our first deadline to sell it. It's this year. It's a pilot top program. There's, in reading the language, once again, someone thought, I really hate crop insurance agents, because there's provisions in there where I have to be notified within 72 hours of the death loss of any calf with photos and vet records. And okay, so I can tell somebody, if you calve your 40 head in your backyard, I'm all in. We can do that. But if you're on a 200,000 acre ranch in New Mexico, that cow's going to eat that calf before you and I mean, like, we're not going to know until branding what was, I mean, like, there's some things in there that people really did not think through, but they also based it off of a crop policy, and that sort of made me, I mean, like, even the loss manual is literally off of, like, you took the corn loss manual and filled in the pieces with this wean calf. It's crazy, but we're supposed to get trained sometime in the next couple of months. So if any of you want to learn more, call me in about December and we'll talk about that. Hopefully I'll be trained by then, but it literally only covers them through weaning, which also is kind of a restrictive deal because a lot of people retain ownership. A lot of people will hold those calves past weaning. So,
Or a combination.
or a combination of the two. Yeah. And so your coverage would stop right there. So it's kind of like, did we do ourselves, you know, any good? But it'll be interesting. We'll see. So, in wrapping things up for you guys, and seriously, y'all, please ask me questions, but this is sort of just my general reminder. And this is what I was talking about earlier when you said you needed to find an agent. It's a relationship business. It needs to work. You need to like the person you're dealing with, because you deal with them a lot, especially on the multi-peril side. And just find somebody that's going to be there for the long haul. There's a lot. LRP is also probably my biggest pet peeve right now. I think every 18 to 25-year-old male in the greater Amarillo area went and got an insurance license and decided to sell LRP this last year. And every single one of them within the first 9 months was calling us saying, how do I undo this mess? Like, these people aren't getting government subsidy. What do I do? And I'm like, oh, you should sell some crop insurance for the last 15 years. But there are a lot of people pushing these products because, once again, I told you, I can write a policy in a minute. Why wouldn't somebody want to sell that? It's way easy compared to all this other craziness that we do. Find somebody that's in it for the long haul, that's not fly by night, that knows all the ins and outs. Because here's the crazy thing about PRF and all these livestock products, whether it's LRP, the grass insurance, or these. If you're a producer that doesn't have crops and you've never darkened the door of an FSA office and are not on record with them, you are missing this magical form called an AB 1026, which is this stupid conservation compliance form that was forced in the last farm bill to make everybody happy, that said you're in compliance with conservation. So if you're a farmer, you've signed it, you're good. I have a lot of people buying LRP that have never been in an FSA office. Guess what? They don't have that form. And there's a quick fix that an agent that knows how to fix it can do to buy time. But otherwise, within basically that first year, you've got to get into FSA and get established with them and get that form filed, which a lot of FSAs right now, they're understaffed, they're overworked, and they're mad at the world. And so you walk in and they're like, you're not farming, I'm not doing that damn thing for you. Know, like, I mean, we've had a lot of struggles this year. So there's some things like that that's where that relationship comes in. You just need somebody that's super trustworthy, that you like, that they're smart, that they do their job, they answer their phone, all the things that you would want to do business with.
Time constraints on the LRP, like if your calves are coming out of the feedlot in of November, can you buy LRP today?
13 weeks is the shortest contract we can write. So that's your limiter on the front end. The only other thing in that policy that is restricted is that you can't sell your cattle more than 60 days prior to the end date, which typically in a feed yard situation, we know when they're coming out. Same with feeder calves. Here's where that 60 days, it used to be 30, which was much harder to accomplish. But the only place that comes in that I tell people is, like, if you're running summer grass cattle in the Texas Panhandle in New Mexico, and you bought them in April and you get to August and it has not rained, you may have to send them to the feed yard or do something at that point. if your contract was for November, you may have screwed up that 60-day window right there. So we have that conversation when we run them, just
Was
because
a 60-day window?
it's just, you can't sell them more than 60 days prior to the end date. So, and that's physical delivery. You can still market them in any way you want. They could be forward contracted, they can be sold on Superior Livestock, which we see that a ton. We've got a really good relationship with Superior, and a lot of people are using them to market cattle. And they can, like our own operation, we sold our cattle in August on a sale. They're not gonna be delivered till next week. So, it's that physical delivery date that kicks in there.
So if I own the pasture, they're out on pasture, and I take it to the yard.
You still own them, it would be fine. Yep. For sure. So. Absolutely. It would just be if you'd sold them to the feed yard. So. I think just like anything, and this is something too, for those of you that have husbands, pass this memo along, that the ones that do part of this business too. They should know, like, I have so many people that are like, man, I'm so sorry I took up your time. Gosh, y'all, that's what I get paid for. Like, I want people to know they can have as much of my time as possible. It's no longer a 5-minute rubber stamp business. It's a pretty complicated deal when we're making these decisions on policies. And we've finally kind of gotten our customers trained where they know they just may have to spend the day with us or a couple of hours, but don't treat it like, one, you're imposing on anybody else. That is never an imposition. We make money to do what we do. We're obviously being compensated for this. So I hope people know that, like, their time is valuable. I want them to know I will spend as many hours as I need to spend to service their account. But two, they need to give us that time. The only time we really run into problems in train wrecks is the people that didn't have time to come see us and didn't have time to answer their phone or didn't respond to the 75 texts we sent that month. That's where problems come in. And I don't think we'd be the only ones that had those problems. And then finally, just keep good records. I know y'all have probably talked about that a lot in this class. The record keeping is huge. And I know so many of your families probably rely on you for that. I'm unfortunately the world's worst secretary that ever lived, for my husband, and I'm terrible and I want to be fired, but I just can't seem to get fired. So, and then just like know your deadlines, know your requirements. I tell people I can undo anything as long as I knew about it ahead of time, but after the fact, it's pretty hard these days. Federal crop insurance is so restrictive. If acres are wrong, somebody's writing a check. It's either me or the customer, but the insurance company's not going to be the one to fix it. So just tend to business, do what you do best, and stay on top of things. That's pretty much same thing there. I think verbalizing your expectations is so huge. And that's really a big deal for you guys, because we're women, we're communicators. We do this a lot better than a lot of other people. When you're working with an insurance agent, tell them what you expect from them, how you want to be communicated with. I mean, like, if you're a text only person, tell me that. For the love of God, I'll text you. But if you hate text messages, I will never text you. I will call you every time. But it's a big deal. And I think so many of us have forgotten that along the way, that it's okay to tell people how we want to be communicated with. I had a guy tell me the other day, he was like, why don't you just call my wife? She works in town. She'll come sign any of this. I'm like, well, because you never told me that was acceptable. And he's like, call my wife. She'll be there in 5 minutes. I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna call your wife every time. I like her a lot better than you anyway. So we call the wife now. So, I mean, that's kind of the end of it for me. I hope y'all have questions. I hope it's been beneficial for you. Crop insurance is a pretty big topic and lots of moving parts, but, Dee can give all of y'all my contact information. I didn't put it in those slides, but,
Well, let's see just an extra time, Rachel, for me off from my lesson.
anytime, like random.
Yeah.
If you have random questions about stuff, you can call me anytime. I tell people all the time, I answer as many questions from non-customers, study customers. I want people to get it done and done right. So please reach out anytime.
So a lot of the farmers been talking about this loophole they found with the Prince Organ stuff. They got closed this year, and they're all pissed off about it. What's inside exactly?
Was that on prevented plant?
I believe so. They're small, but
Well, the biggest loophole on forest sorghum was that, in all of prevented plant figures. So prevented plant is so unheard of in the Texas Panhandle, y'all. Like, they do it every year in the Midwest and with the coast.
some new fan too.
Because we got so much rain right there in that May, June time frame. So prevented plant, obviously there was a lot of it. we were told early on, specific companies said, hay is your only cover crop that you can plant behind that. Well, lo and behold, all of a sudden, sorghum silage was a cover crop that could be planted and harvested behind prevented plant corn. Well, there was a lot of acres that were going to sorghum silage already anyway. They were never intended to go to corn. They were not going to cotton. So they basically got paid their prevented plant payment, plus got to grow their crop they were going to grow. So, but I have not heard that it's been closed. Corn was disallowed as a crop a few years ago after the 2019 debacle. RMA is aware that there was an excessively large amount of sorghum silage planted behind prevented plants, so I would expect it to be taken out, but you never know. So, but once again, I mean, this is the hard one, like in my line of business. It's an option. They made it available. We roll with it. You know, that's the biggest deal is that, you know, do I agree? But it was there, so fire away and do it. I mean, if that's what's best for your business, that's what you have to do, so. And I mean, truly, y'all, we had preventive plant that was legitimate. I mean, like, I have, like, 2019, we had a pretty good scare, 2015, we had a pretty good scare, but we had never seen acres on this scale that just were underwater.
It was rain and but you get the field.
Yeah, yeah. So, and there's certain areas that cotton is their only option. They cannot plant a grain crop because of the hogs and different things like that. And so, you know, cotton's window is this big and it just.
How's that pay?
Each crop is different, but essentially, on cotton, you get 50% of your insurance guarantee. You pay 100% of your premium as long as you do not plant an insurable second crop, or not even insurable, as long as you plant nothing other than a cover crop behind. So that's where sorghum silage was an option as a cover crop. If you did preventive plant on cotton and went to grain sorghum, which is an insurable crop behind it, then you only got 35% of your PP payment. So on grain sorghum, it was 60% of your insurance guarantee. You only got 35% of the 60%, pay 35% premium, insured second crop fully. So
I've seen carriers are moving out area.
oh, do I? It's been a tough several years in crop insurance. There are, so right now, like I'll tell, a year ago, I think there were 16 or 17 nationwide like what we call AIPs, they're approved insurance providers. They are the underwriting company that we write policies through. So Rain and Hail, Pro Ag, AgriSompo, all these names y'all have probably seen on crop insurance. Today there are 12. Of those 12, there were 6 doing business in Texas. There are about 3 actively wanting to stay in Texas, and the rest are trying their dangest to get out of here. That is coming in the form of canceling customer contracts, canceling agent contracts. They technically can't cancel a policy if there's no like valid reason. So therefore, they're just going to cancel the agent and assume that none of us in our right mind would just let our customers go out the window. But there are agents that only wrote with one company who have been canceled, who now have nowhere to go with customers. It's gotten very serious. Yeah, I ended up, I don't know how, because apparently I talked too much. I got stuck kind of on a task force with about 30 agents that we met up here and wrote a letter to the risk management agency. I had a phone call with them last week, and they're well aware of the issue, and they are doing everything kind of within their power to slow that mass exodus down, because it is bad for the industry. I mean, it is like, I'll give you an example that if I've got, let's just say I've got 100 customers with one company, and that company cuts my contract, I have to move every single one of those. So that is not like just magic, snap your fingers. That's literally us retyping every single application, getting everyone signed, making sure every endorsement got moved, that every written agreement we've ever done got moved, and then all their yield history has to transfer. And when that yield history goes sideways to other companies, sometimes they don't really, because it kind of like the data goes to RMA and then it gets sent back to the other crop insurance company. Well, a lot gets lost in translation there. So then we have to go back literally for every single unit on every single policy and make sure that all of our yields went. And so it's a huge undertaking. And so that's kind of been our biggest push, is just one, trying to preserve the options for our customers, but two, everybody knows it's hard to hire people right now. I mean, like if that happens and I have to move every customer sideways, that's a whole nother employee that I need in my office. And guess what? They're not trained. So then that's also, I mean, that's the next problem. They can go, make my lunch while I look at APHs. So, but no, it's a big, big issue. With crop insurance, an agency, that whole deal I was saying about fund, no, I can say it. I don't care. I don't care. I'm probably like one recorded that this will get sent to RMA, but, when I said like find an agent you really trust, like find someone with integrity that is a decent human. There was an agent in Brownfield. This is all rumor hearsay, but I mean, the bottom line is, he was paying off insurance adjusters that were to get better appraisals for his farmers and then taking people on big lavish trips. Which I offered Deerheart a trip to Florida because he didn't think that was lavish enough. But, what? That's just stupidity. And he was very arrogant about it. Apparently ran his mouth like to everyone publicly about it. There's also a cotton gin down south that was moving production and maybe there was a lot of cotton that was never planted. Well, those are terrible. Like we're in a farm bill year. We're trying to get ERP money finally paid. We're trying to get a farm bill passed. There's a huge ag approach bill sitting out there. These are not the bad stories that need to be in the media, which has nothing to do with y'all. That's other people in business that made poor choices. But that's my whole like integrity speech. When I tell my customers like I love you, but I won't do jail time for you, I mean it. Like I don't look good in orange. Like that's terrible. So yeah. But it was dumb mistakes. So. And we've seen the tightening of the industry this year with adjusters too. These companies are obviously losing their butts. They're putting the pressure on their adjusters. I am still confident our adjusters did a really good job in the field. But that was the conversation I kept having with my customers as I said, was it fair? That's the bottom line is, was your adjustment fair? And for the most part, they were able to say yes. We had a few crop hail claims that we're still kind of fighting over. So.
Do you see the repercussions of those coming down for next year?
I hope not.
And how?
Well, since the company that I think that person was paying off adjusters with is one of the few that wants to stay in Texas, I really hope there's not big enough repercussions that they exit the market. They won't. They're a big enough carrier. They will stay in Texas. But I hope it doesn't give crop insurance a black eye as we're sitting there when you start looking at farm bill negotiations, yes, everybody wants tweaks to Title I and different commodity programs, but at the end of the day, every single message is keep crop insurance. And when you look at the fraud rate in crop insurance, it is so tiny. It is true. We get looked at every single day, but when you hear those stories, it's just like immediately you get punched in the gut because there are people out there doing a good job and doing what they're supposed to do. And,
I hadn't seen it. Were they getting paid for lower prices?
I think so. That's kind of I think like cash, put cash in the guy's truck when he would leave a field, so I'm nice, right? I wish they put cash in my truck, but.
Yeah. Well, ever on this or whatever, he said that he's hearing that crop insurance has a lot of positive changes for these.
Yeah, so I was at our national crop insurance lobby meeting in Boston, 2 weeks ago. And that's why I bought these fancy pants, by the way, y'all, because I needed to wear. But it's my high-waisted joke before you got here. But yeah, so I think essentially the language of the Farm Bill has already been written. Like I think the House Ag Committee, Senate Ag Committee, they're sitting on it. They've got some good positive things going on. They've just got to find the right time and mechanism to get that bill through. Whether that ends up being in an omnibus, whether that ends up being through a standalone negotiation. I think it'll be really interesting to see how it plays out. But I don't think crop insurance is going to be harmed. Obviously, there will always be the terrible amendments that come out about crop insurance and cutting the subsidy and doing things like that. But I think there are enough people that support crop insurance to kind of keep that all together. So.
Any other questions for Rachel?
Good job.
Thanks.
Because I'm to my right to go to the bathroom. Yeah, well, it's gonna be like eat my people from here and go there and have like. I know you're right. Yes. It's even looking more, I would be careful. Get ready to do it. Okay. It's your house, different. So that. Yes, I'm here, still they mentioned. Here, but maybe the lady from the sister. They're on the way, so. In the room, time. Sitting down and I. I'm not continuing to let go. You have been understood. I don't think I understand. I don't know. Yeah, I just. You know what? Saying. Yeah, that's like. Our speed information. That's like. Yeah, the students would see all of the students on the. I'm sure one of it is. It's five turns. Following is dominant. He uses control and keep. Sit on the music. Just to pass on, see the continuing to. Anyway, last week, shit, I'm bad from five stars. It started. I'm really glad. I found it. No. Yeah, yeah. She let her go to the back bar. Probably my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, there's. It's what they do really great. See the trip from what's it here? Because. Dogs. Like the carnage to return to. She's so organized, the recipient. It's nice, not large, when I met it. Nothing kind of food. I feel. My friend. Yeah.
Very first one, you know, so the teacher will say, "What's the picture?" And we're because so it's gonna be exact. Basically, all of it. They still lovely. And then, so 17 members representing 48,000 years. So, yeah, and it must be it's quite nice as a dog, which is anywhere from territory volume to business from. Majority of them were being operations. Yeah. Where do you get the brains or very dangerous and terrible lives? And she doesn't. These are just the regular years. There has sneezing on. That's for some comes right now. And it takes $10 which I don't see about 21. So don't run, here's my 2 counts. But yeah, and amount to what's my restitution. So everybody showed up. I don't know, which has got my month's list. She was being her do, but she is next to him, but she. It was, I was mentioned Jennifer, so she was like, well, you did it on such, she was never. Me, I was up and right, she was so. It's fine, wait.
We appreciate Rick for coming. So I was telling some people earlier, you know, I'm an advocate, and so I do lots of presentations that I will talk any kind of market outlook. I'll do policy, I will do budgets, but I will not talk insurance because it changes too damn fast. And so it's just to me, it's a full-time job to even try to keep up with exactly what's going on with that. And I will not do payroll. I don't like to talk about hiring or firing people because that's costs and IRS changes too. So I'll let Brenda handle that type of stuff. So, and as for the husbands, Rachel, I don't know, you can probably agree with this. Do other husbands listen to you a lot better than your own?
No.
Probably.
Yeah. Mine do. I can tell any other farmer, great idea, and they'll do it. Mine is like, I just don't know. So anyway, but our next presenter, Rachel was talking about the importance of record keeping. Y'all seen Brenda here for the last 5 weeks or so. And so as a CPA, asked her to talk briefly just a little bit about the importance of record keeping and financial.
Yeah. So yay, we get the night with accounting. I mean, who wouldn't be, right? Okay, so you're down. There we go. So yeah, Rachel talked about how important it was to really keep good records. But not only do you need to keep those records, but you got to use them. So if you don't understand your numbers, you know, you're kind of behind the ball a little bit because that really is the foundation to your entire business. So some of the top things that just some of the points that came off the top of my head when I was thinking about what I need from my clients to put together their system, their accounting system. We're gonna go into those different parts in just a little bit. But why do you need to keep those records? I mean, it's obvious that you've got to pay your income taxes. So everybody kind of dreads the book work, you know, because it's got to go to the accountant to do the tax work. But you also have to keep your records for your lender requirements. But how about input pricing? If you're not keeping up with what you've contracted on your inputs versus what you've actually received and what you've actually been charged, because that happens a lot of times with my clients where maybe they're not charged what they thought they were supposed to be charged, what was according to their contract. Hedging strategies. Is there anybody in here that uses hedging strategies? You hedge? Okay. So it's really hard to know where to place your hedge if you don't know what your cost of production is. Right? Selling strategies. How do you know at what price to sell your commodity at if you don't know what it costs you to produce that commodity? And then estate transfer. If you have a good set of reconciled statements, not just financial statements, but just record keeping in general, it's a whole lot easier to know what you have to transfer and then how to put that together in a good strategy for that transfer. And y'all feel free to stop me whenever, but just simply keeping the records does not help mitigate the risk. You've got to actually put that into motion for decisions. So just remember, you can't manage what you don't measure. If you don't measure it, how in the world are you gonna manage it, right? Oh, and this is a picture of my friend in Wyoming, her little boy. Well, he's not so little anymore. He's high school rodeoing now. So that's Trig. But I wanted to add a little something to this and just say, to take it one step further, how about we put all of these records, pull them all together and make a business plan out of them? How many of you in here have a business plan? Not everybody at once. It's tough. I mean, and you don't know really where to start. But I'm going to point you in the direction of where to start on that. And that should be a living document. It's not something that is just a one and done. That's something that you need to visit every year. You need to see if you're adhering to that plan. Is it making a difference? That kind of thing. But if you will kind of at least consider a business plan, I promise that will help you continue to make those good decisions. And thereby you're going to reach your long-term goals or have a better chance of it.
What do you consider a business plan?
I'm going to show you all the different parts of it. So, but in a nutshell, a plan is just your whole entire strategy. It's not just financial. So what is the foundation of kind of what are some of the different pieces of these records? You've got your inventories. Y'all, this is something I see a lot, especially with cow-calf producers and stock, not so much with stockers and feeders, but I do an analysis called SPA analysis, which is standardized performance analysis for beef cattle. And you'd be real surprised to a lot of people don't know how many cows are exposed. So if you don't know how many cows were exposed, how can you really figure your weaning rate? So that is one of the big deals. Also, I have a client that keeps their feed inventories. So this particular client, they buy little baby dairy calves and then grow them out just to a feeder phase. So they have a bunch of different growers. So they move some of those feed assets between growers. And so they have a feed inventory at each grower. So on our balance sheet in our asset section, we have all of the different feedstuffs. And then we have another field that carries the information for what grower that's at. When I first started working for him, he had a different account, like in your chart of accounts, for each grower, for each feed stuff. And I was like, this has got to change. We can't do this. So One of the second parts of the foundation is how many acres do you have? For most, it's an easy thing to say, but then when you start trying to reconcile that to FSA acres, to crop insurance acres, to boundary acres, there can be some differences there. And when you're looking at a true cost per acre, the analysis that we do is an analysis per field. So that can get pretty hairy if your boundary acres and your FSA acres and your crop, they're not going to agree, but you got to pick one. So that's a little crazy. And then if you double or triple crop, then that's another thing that some people struggle with. They talked earlier about the FSA and your insurance documents. There's a section in your business plan for that. They can go hand in hand, and you can reconcile those acres for both to what you've planted as well. So all of this stuff needs to be kept, and it sounds kind of daunting, but there's ways to do that. Your equipment list and your other fixed assets. How many of you trade equipment often? We don't have as many farmers. Okay, y'all do. So can that get a little crazy for your tax accountant? Yeah. So sometimes do you feel like they're just kind of hounding you about, I need this purchase. What'd you pay for it? What'd you finance for it? And that kind of, well, you did a trade on me. Well, it's important because there's not only is it important for income tax purposes, but if you want an accurate balance sheet, that's also important. So I work with a client down in South Texas that trades constantly, like he'll just go buy something at an auction and you won't find out about it until maybe 2 years later. Seriously, because he'll pull money from one account or the other, and it's crazy. Bank, loan, and hedging statements. Bank statement's easy. You all get a bank statement. Loan statements are easy, and your hedging statement, you're going to get. But do you open them? Do you reconcile them? What do you do with them? Do you use them? Your input applications. So another thing that I do is, again, I told you that we hold all of our inputs per field. Well, I work with farmers and ranchers, and then another guy that doesn't do either really. But we need to know how much of each product was put out on each field on each acre. Now we're kind of moving the clients toward that. Not everybody is there, and that's okay. If you know how much of your fertilizer you put out on your corn, or how much you put out on your grass for your cattle, that's okay, as long as we know, and we can kind of allocate that way. But then as you get better and better about where that cost is going, then you can kind of start dialing in on exactly what field and so forth. And then your lease arrangements. This is important for me because the program that I use, the accounting software that I use, actually uses the owner operators, the leases, how many acres. It's all pulled together to tell the program what we're going to do with that piece of land for that year. So I need to have that as well. And you need to have it for your business plan. So back to your inventories, your input inventories. This is not just your cattle inventories or your goat inventories. These are your inputs. And it may be that you don't operate on the scale to need this, or maybe you don't carry inventories over year to year, and that's okay. But if you do carry over inventories and then, kind of mix and mingle between crop years, then it might become more and more important. But you'll need to know your seed, chemical, and fertilizer. And I understand that, we have a good amount of livestock producers in here. So that might be your hay that you're carrying over, might be some silage. It could be, if you're a cow-calf producer, your production cycle is even longer. So the matching principle, and I'm going to talk about that later, is even a little bit tougher, especially if you retain ththose calves through a stocker or feeder phase. So it gets even way more complicated if you want to have good numbers on your cow herd than it is for crop producers. So on those inventories, obviously you need to know the cost. That's kind of easy. You need to know how much, the quantities. That's still kind of easy. for what crop year. And then there's a couple of other little things. The crop and the crop year, I'm going to kind of touch on later as to why you need that. And I'm going to show you how we hold it in the software that we have. So we can buy a fertilizer, apply that fertilizer, and it's still held as an investment in growing crop on the balance sheet. So, and I don't want to get into those details too much yet. Feel free to ask me questions though, if you want me to explain it further right now, I sure will. Yes. Center. Yeah. Yeah.
Try to.
Yeah. Yeah, Centerpoint is by Red Wing Software, and it's really more of a database. It looks like QuickBooks and it functions like QuickBooks, but it just has a whole lot more data fields. So the setup is very important. It's very, but just the day-to-day use of it is pretty simple, but the setup is a lot.
Targeted towards ag.
It is for it says in the name for agriculture. They do have Centerpoint products that are not specified for agriculture, but I use the one that is. And I'm sorry that, yeah, what a day to kind of develop some laryngitis. This weekend, I went home to just kind of a little aside to see some of my classmates, and we ended up going and seeing some live music and stuff. So I'm going to count it, so I don't talk very often. And so I had to talk really loud. Party like I partied, girl, and now I can't talk. Just kidding. Pass the inputs, the inventories of your stored crops. Again, the quantity of your stored crops, and then also by crop year. And then if you have cattle, this is what I run into a lot with cattle. Are they raised or are they purchased? And then what phase of production are they? Are they still on the cow? Are they stockers? Because if they're weaned, they're going to be considered stockers, or in the preconditioning phase. Or are they feeders? So, sometimes keeping those all separate, if you want to get down to your cost of production per phase. And I highly recommend it, but it's not super easy to get there, but it can happen. Again, here's little Trig dragging calves. He had an ex. Say again.
Inventory will sell. No, it's very good. It's good.
It's meticulous. You fight with it sometimes because if you're going to deal with one of the inventory accounts in Centerpoint, you have to have a quantity. So, and then you run into issues of, if you're dealing with, an input quantity, are you talking about ounces or gallons or tons? And sometimes you can buy it in tons and apply it in gallons or, ounces or whatever, or pounds, I guess I should have said. So.
Hang on, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
How do you value a raised?
Glad you asked. So I'm going to kind of dive off into here. So, I'll just dive off now. So first part that you said was that. So what I'd like you to move to is what the index goes to. So what does that involve? That involves gathering up all the costs that you put into that cow from the time you exposed it to the brew. And holding those costs somehow, you can't do it in QuickBooks because I teach the range management students down for King James Challenge. It's something that we use it 20 years through a law. For what? No, talking about just management accounting through. Oh, yeah. 20 years, 25 years. So it can happen in QuickBooks. It's not easy, but it can happen. It's fairly easy. Okay, so you gather up all the costs from the time you expose her, and you just hold them with her until you clean. Now that's pay, that's property taxes, that's any supplements, any vaccinations. And it's also labor, and it's utilities, and it's depreciation. So, and I know that it's it can be a little challenging to kind of change your mindset, your concept to go, okay, I can kind of do the vaccination, but I need to have these. But how in the world do I do the labor, the utilities, the accounting fees, that kind of stuff. Well, it's an allocation process. So, I don't dive too much into that, but I certainly can just derail and go. I'll get into a little bit of that. Usually, we don't have an accountant in the room and someone who loves accounting over here. So people don't usually, they usually glass over when I start talking about management accounting. Here's Eleanor. I was telling you, the dog, who was I telling about the dog with the icicles? That's our dog Eleanor. She says that's a lot of record keeping, and it is. She loves the snow. Her real name is Ellie, but when she chases a UPS man, she gets called Eleanor. She hates him, wants to load up with him. Oh, it's terrible. Okay, I'm gonna pause right quick for some questions, and I'll tell you whether or not I get into it later, or kind of where's your mindset on this right now?
You work for me to do, this is what I was trying.
Yes, ma'am. That's what my company is.
And what do you,
I'm a management accountant.
So what's sort of, depends on how fast the operations, I'm sure, they're sort of role are.
I mean, it's a yearly engagement, and typically I'm gonna charge anywhere from, $1,000 a month to $2,500 a month. It's kind of what my clients are. Okay. But that's for ongoing work. Several of those clients, we did a complete setup, and I mean, ground up kind of deal. And then a couple of them already had their CenterPoint database going. It's not that, I don't work much with QuickBooks. I will help direct people and kind of help advise and kind of coach you along. But as far as like doing the daily stuff, I don't do. But I can help you find people. Now, if you want to do the management accounting, it's so different. It's such a mindset switch for people, because unfortunately we've been so conditioned, and I'm gonna say it, by the tax accountants, to say we want the cash account. And they just don't think anything else matters. But guess what? Income tax expense is nothing but one more line item expense on your income statement. Yes, you should mitigate it. Yes, you should strategize on it. But at the end of the day, it's still just an expense. So I would hope that you'd want to manage your business a whole lot more than just for income taxes.
Let's return on investment as well as.
Exactly. It's return on investment. It's how are you going to go forward with your business? It's how can you, patch the holes in the boat, and then kind of bolster up the things that are doing well. Yeah. It's pretty complex, but it's not undoable. When I first went to work I used to work for a Niagara Work Extension. Back in 2002 through about 2007 or so, or 6. Anyway, doesn't matter. But my job was to work on the Tomorrow's Top Ag Producer Program, which was a program specifically for teaching producers how to put together a business. It was an 18-month program, and we met 4 times, I think, for a week at a time. And it was intense, and we did everything from, each part of the plan, and we also built out this financial part from a management perspective using QuickBooks. And like I said, I still teach QuickBooks at the King Ranch Institute, but only because I have to. I hate it. I just hate it. But CenterPoint's not for everybody. That's what I choose to do, because that's where most of my clients want to go. So does that help answer it a little bit?
Is there a certain size plan where it makes more sense to move, like to transition to CenterPoint, like on a CalCap operation? I mean, is there any magic number there?
No, I mean, the small stuff, I use it for my business. So it's very powerful. You don't have to use the features that are available. So it can be just as simple as QuickBooks, honestly. It's just, you just kind of need to make sure not to delve into stuff. I mean, there's a process where you actually push a button that says, these are my inputs. I'm going to apply this much and this much and this much to these. So as those records are coming in on, say, your data capture on your, JD Ops or something like that, as that information is coming in, you can put it into the accounting system. So
CenterPoint runs, like,
It's like 800 for an initial setup. And then go forward, I can't remember what it is for you, but it's like a seat. But you're required to buy the, service, which is great. Because you call and the only accent you hear is a Minnesota accent. I mean, you talk to people.
So that's gonna be more costs, I mean, with the subscription and all that, it's not competitive, so that it used to not be, so yeah, but it's kind of certain streaming.
Yeah. Yeah, they are. And I mean, if you need help with it, it's hard. Now granted, it is more used, so you can like YouTube it and find help with it, so, but, well, another good thing about Centerpoint is you can put multiple companies within the same database, so if you have several different operating companies, and you want to roll up the cost of production with one, you can do that. Has really good cash versus accrual accounting. One of my clients has, I think it's 4 different operating businesses within the same database, plus I think 12 other bank accounts. I think there was a total of 12 or 15 bank accounts. There's like 18 bank accounts. So who was saying, I think you were saying that you hadn't reconciled since like February or something. That was you. That was you.
I run a great ship in our real business.
Hey,
It's just like there's real loose ship.
Had something to say.
Can I ask, so it's cloud-based,
It is.
and like, it's not true cloud-based,
It goes through server.
okay, and then how does the cybersecurity work around it base? In that? Just something that I think of, I'm sorry, Ted.
I don't know. So what I know about it is that it's not anything
Okay,
and you log into it English.
right.
So the actual platform, the Centerpoint was built in a bit older. So for instance, the dots for Azure and VPI on your laptops makes it very hard to see Centerpoint because it's very small. So it's all over. But it's been around forever and it went.
Will it keep measuring, maintain, you can catch it.
Okay. Oh, yeah, today I opened one of my clients' databases and I have quite a few updates to, very good payment. Very good. So I don't need for it to be a commercial person at all. It's just, it frustrates me because there's nothing else on the market. So you asked Rachel, what's the magic size?
Yeah.
There really isn't. For anybody can use Centerpoint. I just think that you just have to be very nice. Like for my company, the only thing I use is one of the extra things that you can use. Just so I can kind of keep track on, what I'm doing for a particular client, am I working on a client or working on my own stuff or, So. Okay. So we kind of talked already about acres, the boundary versus the planted versus the FSA and the insurance. And I don't know that I have really developed, what exactly you should use at this point. I just say pick one and be consistent. But I would actually pick probably the FSA or the insurance, which usually are the same acres. So I would use those acres and then let the fallout kind of, like if you were going to plant your corners or something like that, just understand, just take it with a grain of salt. But that way you'll have that documentation to just take to Rachel and go, here it is on a yearly basis. This is what our planting plan is. We kind of already talked about the applications that may or may not be as relevant to you guys. Sales, this can be relevant. So if you're going to use QuickBooks, that's just fine. But I would say use the class feature to at least designate your crop and your crop year. So you would name in your class feature, this is 23 corn, this is 23 wing cakes. Okay. Then when you sell the next year, your commodity, let's say you weed your calves in 23 and you're not going to sell until 24. At least you know which group of calves you're talking. So at least you can designate that. So when I say crop year, that's what I mean. And then also the quantity.
That's helpful if you're gonna do some analysis. And then, are they raised or purchased calves? We would go into more detail if I had more time, but it's really important to know, are they raised or are they purchased? Fixed assets. You got your depreciation schedule that your CPA, your tax CPA provides for you. And that's a great starting point. And I would take that and I'd walk out there and say, what do you still have? What do you not have? Tell them what you don't have. Say it's gone. If you can remember when you sold it or when you salvaged it or whatever you did, then note that. If you have something out in your, barn, whatever, that is not on that depreciation schedule, you might want to kind of say, okay, why is it not on there? Did I neglect to tell that tax professional, or do I not own it? Is it a lease? Whatever it is. Okay. I think it's really important to do that. Your breeding livestock, have good numbers of your breeding livestock. That's also going to translate to your depreciation schedule. Someone had mentioned raised heifers. So, obviously raised heifers are not generally on your depreciation schedule, but if you were to be able to accumulate the costs associated with raising those heifers, you should put those on your depreciation schedule. Thing is you don't take the expenses associated with raising that heifer in the years that you're, like if you're in her first year, you're not going to expense everything you put into her. You're just going to capitalize it and then depreciate it later. A lot of people aren't going to do that, and that's fine.
For farmers, well, that 129 thing, and then and their accountant will say, hey, you're about to pay taxes, you gotta start buying equipment. I don't agree with that at the time. Day-to-day taxes, not. So, what is your take on it?
Well, I think if you analyzed it out in the tax savings that you're actually saving versus what it's going to cost you over the life of that asset, and it's going to cost you more in interest than probably what you're saving in taxes. So if it's part of your business plan and you knew you needed, to buy something and the time was right and you were going to buy it in February, but you might want to go ahead and buy it in December, that's fine. But don't do it to just mitigate your tax, your tax expense. That's what it is. That's like, I can't even bring a parallel to it right now, but it doesn't make sense to me to increase your expenses to decrease this expense, right? Anyway, that's just my deal. By all means, mitigate your tax. Have a strategy. By all means, do that and work with your accountant. Go for your tax planning in November and see kind of what's coming up. But you might want to hold some grain, not sell it now, wait to sell it later to kind of help with that strategy.
That's the same thing as what's gonna be.
No. Selling grain later is just, that's not 179. 179 is where you take your 100% of the cost, yes. But
You can buy the equipment, right, appreciate it out at once, 100%, yeah, whether they kind of do that.
yeah, selling your grain is completely different.
It's completely different, but it's the same, that strategy.
Well, no, because you're going to sell that grain regardless. By the time when you sell it can be a tax strategy.
See, they really buy some guys when they decide to retire, and they have like no expenses against that grain they sold, that.
And if you depreciate all that, well, you don't have any
Exactly.
on that.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, let's take that a little step further. Well, I haven't talked about the merchant. Remind me to come back to depreciation and tax depreciation versus internal depreciation or straight lines. Okay. Also, you want to keep track of your trades. I already had that on there. And then your cost and your fair market value. I think it's great. Don't keep your fair market value in your accounting system though. That's so easy to be kept outside. Unless you use Centerpoint where it has an extra column for fair market value, you can do that. But a lot of people want to keep their fair market value information. I had a client the other day, and he knows better than this. He tells me how many times, so many times how many PhDs he has. He's a smart man. He tells me all this stuff. Well, then I'm setting up a company for him and he sends me a market value balance sheet. And then wonders why I put the market value of the cattle in there. I was like, well, I thought that was the cost. That's what you sent me. That's what you know better. You know, I needed the cost. It was just kind of funny, I thought. Okay. I think this is kind of getting redundant, but on your loan documents, don't just put in your accounting system that this is, paying down your loan. Let's keep it by each different loan number. Let's reconcile those loans each, not in total. Well, first reconcile them. Your hedge accounts, those also need to be reconciled. You'll need your monthly statements. It usually, I say usually, will tie to I misspelled commodity. It's a commodity. And then your gain or loss. Your budgets. How many people in here have budgets? Okay. Are they in Excel? Do you look at those over the year? How do you use those budgets on a yearly basis? Okay.
See, fertilizer.
Okay, so you just do it like in total dollars for the year, like for a line of credit kind of deal? Okay, yeah. Has that proven beneficial for you? Good. Do you make a decision to not buy something because it's not budgeted? Awesome. That's good. Okay. Back into your accounting, your record keeping. The purchases, that's the easy part, right? They're cash transactions. You can reconcile it all to your bank statement. You book all the deposits that you get and you book all of the cash expenses that you have. I mean, if you're reconciling your bank account in your accounting system, it's hard to not get that part. But what about your vendor accounts? Again, the same client in South Texas that buys all the equipment, has vendor accounts that are unbeknown. I actually am contracted with his CPA. So she did not know about these vendor accounts. So she puts together his loan package and takes it to the bank and then finds out about a $50,000 vendor account. That's really important for your tax professional, not your tax, but your bookkeeping professional or whoever you guys, if you're keeping the books, that's important to get into your accounting system. Loan drafts. I touched on this earlier, reconciling those loans would catch those. Lots of times you might take your check directly to your bank to pay down a note. And so you won't capture that income if you don't reconcile the loan. So, or maybe the loan's gonna pay one of the vendor accounts. Well, you just missed out on a part of your cost of production for your crop or for your cattle because you didn't reconcile your vendor and your loan accounts.
Vendor.
That would be like if you go down to the fertilizer dealer and they just hold it on account for you. You don't have to pay them, whatever it is, the John Deere dealership for repairs. And then what about family? I don't know how this same guy keeps coming up, but his dad had a seed business. And so he got all of his seed from there. Well, guess what part of the cost of production wasn't included when the amount owed to his father wasn't included. So, I mean, it's really important to include everything if you want to know your true cost of production. Did I? Okay, now the matching principle. Is there anybody in here that knows what the matching principle is? I'm guessing too. So the matching principle is when you match up what you just sold. I just sold all of my corn. You match that up to the expenses that produced that corn. And if you start looking at it like that, these expenses are not necessarily just tax deductions. these expenses help to build that commodity that I just sold. So if I don't ever match those up, I won't know if I actually made money on that crop. So, crops in agriculture, our inputs cross the calendar year. So how many of you plant wheat or triticale? Most everybody. Is that gonna go January to December? Never up here. Well, I mean, I don't know anybody that intentionally plants in January or otherwise, actually. So you've gotta, and you're gonna start preparing that ground ahead of time too. So you're gonna put out some fertilizer, maybe, you know, whatever you're gonna do too. All costs of getting that ground ready and planting it. And whatever you're gonna do to it, it doesn't matter if it's December or January. If you can think in a crop year, planting to harvesting, you're gonna be ahead on the cost of production. So the matching principle is matching up all of those costs with what it actually produced, the income that it produced. That's a really important principle, and it has to almost erase that December 31st deadline in your mind. The only thing that that's good for is your taxes. Okay, and that's it. I'm not trying to downgrade that, but I will say the clients that I was telling you about that we set up new from scratch, they came to me, probably it was like a tsunami. There was probably 3 or 4 of them that, like in March, well, we backed all the way up to September and gathered all of those costs associated with that crop. You know, in order to reconcile the bank accounts and the loans and stuff, we had to kind of grab all the costs, but we designated what was for 2023 crop year. We just let 2022 fall out. And then when I say you're going to gather them up, you still, if you're reporting on a cash basis, you still want to obviously let your tax accountant know what you spent as of 12/30. I mean, that's kind of a no-brainer. But you have to also have another field to keep in your accounting system, be it classes in QuickBooks. Or, I mean, Centerpoint is a whole different deal, so I'll just talk about QuickBooks. But use those classes to designate your crop year and your crop, or whatever production, whatever commodity you're producing, might not be a crop. So that's your production year. So your commodity, we talked about this earlier. Some are direct costs like seed, chemical, fertilizer, feed, land rent, whatever it is. That's you can pretty much designate that to whatever it is that you're growing. But those allocated costs, the overhead, the labor, the stuff that's not, that you can't tie directly to it. There are ways. It can be as simple as a percentage, or it can be as complicated as acres times over the field. Or it can be, I mean, there's anything in the world it could be. Just make it relevant and make sure that it tells the story better than before. Okay. And you want to have some amount of consistency year to year. You're going to probably have to change that some, but if you change your entire allocation criteria every single year, you're gonna gather a lot of volatility. So we're on purchases here, and I'm thinking about when I enter a vendor invoice in the accounting system, what are the things that I need to know about? It might be that you know exactly what field that purchase is going on, or what group of livestock that is going to. If you know, you can go ahead and designate it. If you know that you went to buy feed for your lambs, and you know, if you're keeping different lots of lambs, whatever it is, you can designate right then and there what that's for, and you're going to be money ahead if you do that. But those that you don't know what it's for immediately, that's what you're going to have to allocate. And then product, I say it's getting really deep now because, for some of my clients, if they're buying a certain product, again, in Centerpoint, I have all of their product lists set up. So everything that they buy is within the system. So I can choose that product and know exact. And then as I choose that product, it's building that inventory of that product. Now it might be that they went ahead and put it out on the field, and I can designate that too, but then it's gonna reconcile to their input records. And I'm gonna know that they put this particular product out here on this cotton, this corn or whatever. Okay, what you got?
Okay, so if you buy, let's say, by chemical and you don't use all of it, crop here, it's in materials or crop here, how do you allocate that purchase amount for that physical crop? When you're not using all of it?
Well, it can be as simple as going, okay, I bought 100 tons and I used 80 tons. And you just prorated that,
Okay.
just on a percentage basis. It can be that simple. Or it can be, through input records, which are never going to reconcile. There's always going to be a difference, but you got to know kind of what to do with that difference. So, another one of my clients, that's a good point, because they use, this one actually uses granular. Do y'all know what granular is? Okay. So when we looked at their input records that granular had, and then we knew what we bought, there was about a $300,000 difference. So, we're like, okay, where's the discrepancy? The great thing about that, not that there was a discrepancy, but that it's found by reconciliation. So this one client, before we set him up, he was a new setup. He would have just taken the granular records, and let's see, I think that, oh yeah, there was more input applied through granular than what we ever even had in our, and they didn't have a beginning inventory. So it was over applied to the tune of $300,000. So you're going, well, he would have relied on that information and said that his cost of production is higher. So we're right now working on that discrepancy to figure out, did they double enter invoices? Did they have invoices that we didn't have? Was there a mysterious vendor account somewhere where he actually got product and applied it, but the accounting system never knew about it? So, okay. No, it's a data capture system. They call it a farm management system, but it's really, it just captures the security.
Were they all together, it just.
It does, it pulls some data off your tractor, like, the acres planted, like, your.
That should automatically.
It does, but then the invoices, the vendor invoices, to put the dollars with how many acres it was over, that's where the discrepancy is. So,
It's a lot.
yeah,
It's a big discrepancy, and it's not tracking that data.
well, the thing is the dollars are only as good as the person. Because the tractor. So, there's a lady that works for Granular, and she's very, very good. There's no qualms there. She just, she puts all of the invoices in. But the problem is Granular's not reconciled. So I'm also working with a group from Conservice. I don't know if y'all heard of Conservice, but that's kind of what we're doing right now, is we're trying to kind of figure out where these ghosts are, where are these discrepancies, so that we can get ahead of it and know how to mitigate them. There are going to be discrepancies because of boundary acres versus planted acres. At the bare minimum. But if we know about them ahead of time, then we can, kind of go, okay, this is what you're going to expect. You're going to expect a 2% error. That's little. You can do. But 60%, and then compile that year over year. Well, it's no wonder people are having trouble making decisions. Yeah. So.
Yeah, that's probably what it is. That probably was.
Probably wasn't.
For that probably was. Very big.
Yeah, for him it's not. But still it's I can guarantee you he's gonna care about $300,000.
It just seems like a lot to try to draw down the bottom.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that is, Centerpoint is certainly not perfect, not at all. But on a really large operation, it's very helpful. And I will say though too, just like Dee Dee brought up, it's not cost prohibitive even for a small operation compared to QuickBooks nowadays. It used to be, but anyway, I kind of wish that there was some competition, and I am partial to them. They're good people on top of it, I mean, they're just good people. The owner of Red Wing is a past president of the Farm Financial Standards Council. And he has basically, I wouldn't say he built that, but he has directed that to be built according to the Farm Financial Standards Council guidelines. So he's very, very deeply rooted in agriculture. So is all this really worth it? I mean, it's a lot of work for what are you going to get out of it, right? I mean, is it going to make a difference in your operation? I don't know, but the insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So the good news is you can take pieces of this and start working toward it. I think I've probably seen more people get into wrecks by just bailing off and going gangbusters. In fact, I have to keep telling some of the people that work for me and some of the clients, start small. You know, there's one girl, she doesn't work for me, but she works for one of my clients. And she's so good because I just love it because she has really no formal training in accounting or anything, but she goes, but now shouldn't we be doing this? And I said, you are so right. We will get there. Just hang on. Let's just start simple. And it's good to start simple and in an overall, just understanding the matching principle first. Just trying to get things down to your crop and your production year first is great. And then over time, you can just grow to more and more detail. So some of the important points. Reconcile. Oh, when you mentioned about your reconciliation, what I was going to say is one of the new clients this year, the one that had the 18 bank accounts, like 14 of them had not had any transactions entered nor reconciled in all of 2022. I'm not kidding. So most of those were personal accounts, but this guy, he cracks me up because he has no training either, and he bailed off into QuickBooks. He just skipped the QuickBooks stage and went straight to Centerpoint, and his is set up right. Like there's a few tweaks that we can do, and it's been years in the making, and he really worked hard to understand it, but he uses it the way it's supposed to be used. And but anyway, he hadn't put in his bank, nothing in. So here's a brand new client, and all we were doing were just inputting transactions and reconciling. The girls that work for me, you want me to reconcile? Yeah, go reconcile. That's it.
Well, and call with some of the farmers that work with, they get to the point they can't reconcile it, so $1,000 long. If they can, you guys, that literally happened when somebody's used in this room. But anyway, what do y'all charge? Y'all charge them like so much per hour, or what do you do with me?
I would have to look at it. I mean, everything's kind of a case by case. I'd probably, if they only wanted me to do that, I would charge it by name. Yeah, I would just charge it by name. If they were going to be a new client and, you know, ongoing, just like this client that I talked about that had the 18 bank accounts, he says, well, are you going to charge extra? And I said, no, we'll just catch you up. It'll just take longer to get to the fun stuff. But, you know, there's going to come a point that, you know, it'll catch up and we'll, anyway, so I'm waiting for that. So reconcile everything. That the second point, to reconcile total amounts to what has been allocated. We haven't quite gotten there yet. So, we'll kind of skip over that. Keep as much as possible in the accounting software, but don't keep fair market values in there. Excel is good, but can have multiple copies. Oh yeah, I deal with this a lot on Excel, especially if you're working with other people. Nobody knows where the latest copy is. The same guy that has all the equipment turnover. You know, his production records he had fantastic spreadsheets, and I'm talking color coded, and I mean, they were fantastic, but you couldn't reconcile them. They were so big, so many tabs, so many formulas, and nobody knew where the latest copy was. But stuff like OneDrive and Dropbox and stuff like that, where you can work in the same document, helps, but only if the owner doesn't take it and put it on his own computer and do his wizardry, and you never know about it. Again, Centerpoint. It can be difficult to set up. It is difficult to set up. This is, I know you can't see this, but you might be able to see it in your workbooks. This is an actual snapshot of one of my clients. So what I want you to notice here is the columns. This is a report that was built in Centerpoint using the data that we've from the accounting system. Well, it is the accounting system, but it's just a report that was formulated. So you can see how I have a different column for 2023 corn, cotton, rice, and sorghum, and then the dollars per acre of each. So you also see the WIP out past that. That's work in process. So don't concentrate on the numbers. That's kind of irrelevant. I just want you to see the format and see that these are all held in asset accounts. So it's not really an expense until you sell that commodity. So that's where that matching principle comes in. When you buy something, you're so conditioned to say, if it's a cash outflow, it's an expense. It's not until you sell the product that you're building. This is work in process. But this can be accomplished if the setup is correct. That was the whole point in showing you that. And GASP, most operations don't know their cost of production. You can get real close on seed chemical fertilizer. You can pencil that in pretty good. But when it comes to the allocated costs or costs that are carried over from year to year, that's where we kind of struggle a little bit. And wouldn't you think if you're going to build an entire business plan that at the very, very least, we know what our cost of production is? I mean, it's important, but it's something that I just think that ag producers have been done such a disservice because it still is new stuff, even after talking about it for 25 years. It still is new. Well, let me ask, is it new? Is it a new concept for you guys, or is this old news? Show of hands, old news? New news? Nobody has hands?
I think everybody knows about it, but nobody actually does it.
Well, because the devil's in the details. I mean, I think the concept is pretty easy to grasp, but the application is a little more difficult.
Rachel, can you tell me how you sell a producer on the opportunity, cost of their time, first, like with the raised head? Okay, so how do you sell them on keeping accurate information for cost of production, right, which is what we preach, versus the opportunity cost of current value?
I don't really have to sell it.
Okay,
Because all of my clients have been looking for this. And they say, what I think is
we
that,
have new client.
you know, if I have a new, yeah, but I just mean, anybody that comes to me usually is been looking for this for a long time. And there's just so many, that they just have a real worth. There's a lot of people that understand the cost of accounting, and management accounting outside of country, but there's not a lot of providers who can. But if I was, if I needed to sell them, opportunity costs, I would say, is huge if you don't do it. Because I just, it blows my mind, how do you know where your business is at all? And then how can you put that into a business plan? How can you move forward with that if you don't know that base? And I mean, the thing is you could probably get pretty close on paper for this. You could probably pencil it out, but you can't prove it. And that is the problem. It's just like with conservice or with granular. You could get real close because you're feeding it data, but it's not reconciled. So how can you rely on it if it's not reconciled? So I think that might be the selling point. It's just, and it's a bear to get to it. It is a bear.
That's what my people do. Don't do your cost production. How do you effectively market your commodity?
Right.
Because you don't know what crop, let's say, you know your cost production for
cotton. Well, if you don't know what your break-even price is because of your cost of production, how do you know what you need to be marketing?
Exactly.
And same with cattle. And I see that, bite people in the butt all the time.
It's so much tougher with the cattle because they're raised.
Absolutely.
And I mean, you're talking about more than an 18 productions. So by the time, especially if you retain, but
It can be tough to kind of separate that out. And then if you retain them through a stalker phase and then you mix them in with purchase stalkers, then that's another level of complexity. Did that answer your question? Kinda? Okay. But if you start with your decision-based reporting, if you start here, then it's easy to feed your tax, your tax accountant, your lender, your insurance agent, your FSA agent. The problem is a lot of people start up here at tax reporting and it's really hard to feed those other ones from the same system. And then they might not all reconcile. So even though it's hard to begin with, if you start there, the other stuff is pretty easy. Okay, the business plan. So in your notes, and I'll put it up here in a minute, there's a link. And that's to my former boss, Stan Beaver's old webpage, still on. Yeah. I just typed in business plan.
You never think you did.
Yeah.
We all look 2 years old. That's the last one we had. Yeah.
But now I kind of combined like that top one. What we taught was we taught each one of these different pieces separately. So they are very distinct and they are separate and then they come together. So I know I started with the executive summary, the business organization and the history. It sounds kind of weird, but that is extremely important to kind of know what your vision is, where you're going. The next one is your mission and your mission statement, and your vision. If you don't know where you're going, how can you hope to, how will you ever know when you get there, right? So the next is the resource inventory. What do you have to work with? So your resource inventory is not just your inputs, it's not just your tractors, and it's not just your land. It's also your human resources. It's also your what do you have to work with? That would be a profile on everybody that's involved in the operation and what they bring to the table. Just a little blip here. How many of you have heard of the 6 working geniuses? Frank Lencioni? Yeah. But it's great, isn't it? Have you?
I haven't read it, but one of the speakers talked about it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So there's podcasts because that's easier. But I would say maybe you'd have everybody on your team take that 6 working geniuses because you'd find out a lot about what they really, what drives them, what energizes them, and what kind of de-energizes them. Anyway, that's kind of another blip. But your resource inventory includes all of it. Your SWOT analysis. Do y'all know what SWOT is? Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And that link that I provided you has for each one of these sections, there's a publication and a worksheet. So I need to hurry up and go grab it before it's gone, but I think it's very good. There was a whole team of us that worked on it for months and months and months, and I think it's a good product. And it's free. So SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. The next section will be your legal and your liability issues. That would include your estate transfer plan. That would include wills. That would include any kind of, I would say even put all of your lease arrangements in. Anything that might be on the horizon that could affect your business as maybe a threat. Your production plan. This is, I mean, for a given year, that would be, say, your crop plan, or how many, what do you intend to do with your cattle? You're going to turn your bulls out at this time. You're going to pick them up at this time. You're going to wean at this time. You're going to thread check. You're going to buy, okay, the long-term plan for your cattle would be, in 5 years, we want our herd size to start here and go here. Or maybe our herd size to start here and go here. Maybe we're overgrazed. So what is your production plan? How do you intend to get there? Sometimes this production plan And the financial plan and even the marketing plan can come last. I would almost say start with your SWOT analysis, because sometimes that builds out a lot of things you didn't even think about. Your marketing plan, that's gonna include probably your crop insurance, your hedging plan. And anything else. Let's say that you market beef out of your freezer. One of my clients does that too, where the same client that buys the little baby dairy calves and then grows them out. They also have another business where they just sell freezer beef. So, they're gonna have a totally different marketing plan than the other of their companies. Oh, thank you for that. And then of course your financial plan. Now your financial plan is going to include your financial history, which includes your cost of production by crop year by crop. And it also includes your goals. I didn't put goals on there. And where you see that going to achieve those goals. Are there any questions about that? I mean, I'm sure there's a bunch, but I think you guys would really enjoy kind of looking through all of those publications and those worksheets. What I'd do is I'd print it all off. At least the worksheets, and then just kind of start hammering away. And if you start with that SWOT analysis, that'd probably be pretty eye-opening as far as where you think your goals need to be.
So probably write that.
Yeah. Oh, so look at what I did.
Not exactly yours.
Yeah, I just copied it and put it in this. Sorry, I was in a hurry.
Well, TAMU.edu.
Yeah.
That's all that on there.
Yeah. And then I think you go under resources. Here, you go under resources and then business plan, I believe. And Dee Dee's going to talk next week about some of the other tools and resources that A&M provides. One of my goals with my business is to see how I can use all of the tools that everybody with A&M has worked so hard to, produce, and try to pull that together to help serve my clients better. I think that would be really good because there's a lot of good stuff on there. There's a lot of inventory worksheets, there's budgets, there's crop budgets, well, she's going to talk about all that next week. And there's Trig again. He's acting like a boss. He's bigger than that now. Here's my contact information. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you have. Tonight, tomorrow, email me, send me a smoke signal, whatever you need to do, anytime. Just like Jason said, well, this is really close to your heart because I will say I was out of college for 5 years before I decided to go back and get my CPA. And if you'd have told me that I was going to grow up to be a CPA, I would have laughed at you because that was nowhere in my plan. I only did it so I could work with ag producers. I hate taxes. I don't do audit. I don't do any of that stuff. I only work with ag producers on management accounting, and that's because that's where my heart is. So I am more than happy to answer questions or help guide